Welcome back to Women Making Moves, where we celebrate the moves that women are making. My name is Amy Pons, founder of Unlock the Magic, and I'm joined today with Danielle Spencer. Danielle is an author, privacy rights advocate, IT specialist, and U.S. federal government whistleblower. She is a senior leader with over 20 years of experience focused on business, finance, and acquisition management. She is a change agent, transforming and improving business operations and processes. She has 2 master's degrees, one in business administration, the other in information systems, and a Bachelor of Science degree in medical and research technology. Ms. Spencer is also certified in information assurance or cybersecurity and project management. Danielle, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm too. A big part of my work is energy work and trusting the universe and my spirit guides, and I'm very spiritual. So I love it when beautifully, no matter who you subscribe to or what you subscribe to, beautifully we were brought together. And I always love the way that happens. And so many things from your bio, I'm like, yes. I'm a whistleblower. I spent 20 years and half of that in leadership in financial services, where I led actually the enterprise's day one for CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act. So privacy for consumers is something that I really got into unbeknownst to me, like when I started my career. And then of course, like cybersecurity, again, at the end of my corporate career, I say end because, well, who knows, but that part, I led product management for a global digital payment wallet. So as you can imagine, with the security and deep into product management and the technology of it all. So I have a maybe beginner data set on all the things that you're experts in. You've done a lot. I already feel the passion behind every one of these. So I'd love to hear more of that first, if you don't mind, or touching on anything I said so far.
Sure. So I'll start with when I was young, I actually wanted to be a pathologist. So that's why I have the degree in medical research technology. I did my first autopsy and it did not go well.
Not like an autopsy, like biology 7th grade, like frog.
No, it was an actual dead body. I went in with the pathologist and his 2 assistants. The last thing I remember was seeing the guy on the table. However many minutes later, I completely blacked out. The next thing I remember was the assistants. They had me against the wall asking me if I was okay. And I was like, okay, well, career change. I won't be a pathologist. I have no idea what happened in that span of time, but it must have been really bad because they looked frightened. And so that's why I transitioned to the IT field. And I want to say I've done just about everything in IT. Started out trying to do networking, help desk, coding, some systems administration, testing, and I was not good at any of it. A career counselor, pulled me aside and said, because of your background, you're very detail oriented, you're very process oriented. So let's, stay in IT, but move more onto the operations standpoint, project management, contract management, finance, budget, HR. And that's what I did. And I've been doing that for over 20 years. The good part is that because I started out trying to do the technical work, I have an understanding of the technical part. And I could work with the techies and with executives and help translate whatever the requirements are for both of them. When they would come in and say, well, we got to harden this server to do X, Y, and Z. And the executives are like, what are they talking about? And I'm like, basically, they're trying to make it where someone cannot hack into it. So I was able to bridge that gap. And that's basically what, I say I've been doing for actually now it's close to 25 years. And I'm still in that work, still doing it.
Danielle? Oh my gosh. I've had a few guests on the show. We've talked about this specific, understated, dire. If you don't have someone there to be able to bridge the conversations happening between the business and technology. And, I lived in a world where at one point I was the product owner, the product manager, and writing the feature stories and then doing all the UAT on the other end as well. So like literally soup to nuts. That was kind of nice because I was also the business. And then I was also in charge of getting the marketing out the door for said product. So I wore every hat. And I feel kindred with you because I understood all of the how and
Yeah.
what we'll do. And then like when I got feedback, but then also very quickly we're all like, oh, one person can't do all of that. No, we can't. Or we can, but it was like that was,
Too much.
oh
It
my
was
gosh,
too
it was too
much.
much.
Yes.
And then I got into this space where when I was leading the digital payment wallet, yeah, it's like getting people in the room saying, I only have marshmallows. And the other person is saying, I want cereal. I only have marshmallows. Well, make the cereal, but I only have marshmallows. You're like, that's an awful example. No, but like,
No, but it's very applicable for those of us who are in the IT field. It is very, but I don't understand. I want this, but we
but
only have that. And like, okay,
well, and then what's interesting is I found that all of the developers and the terminology I'm sure changes by every single company, but whether architects or developers or engineers or coders, they know the system inside and out. And one time I remember there was something that leadership was mandating and also set a hard deadline, which please leaders don't ever do that when you're building something. They're like, we need this by this date. The developers took that as a firm, okay, we're doing this. Well, the foundation, like the rails, were not built for that new functionality. And so they kind of built it on, the best I can call it is like they kind of built it on a microsite. It was like meant to be temporary while they figured out a way because the leader wasn't listening or nor would they listen. So we had this like major functionality built on like scotch tape and rubber bands. And of course it broke. And then it was like a bigger, much bigger ordeal.
yeah,
So what you describe as being able to bridge the gap, anyone listening in leadership on all sides, actually, be able to have that person that understands here's what we're trying to do and being able to say, hey, listen, this cool new thing that's going to be a game changer, we don't have the rails built for it, so it's going to be a year. What's scary to me is when you look under the hood of so many big corporations' technology stacks, it's a lot of scotch tape and rubber bands.
yes, all to please executive X or executive Y and not taking, especially security,
Yes.
not taking into account security and making sure that they secure the data or the network or other aspects of systems that it's connecting to. So, yes, there are a lot of challenges there.
Oh, challenges. Oh gosh. Because like how many, what was it? 2 or 3 million American Social Security numbers just got leaked. Mine was one of them, by the way,
Oh, that's
which is cool. Neat stuff. So yeah, to your point, we cut corners in order to appease someone that doesn't get the whole picture, nor is trying to get the whole picture. So slow down, because what is really scary is that these systems that a lot of really important information flows in and out of, a lot of them are scotch tape and duct tape, and we're just like hoping that one day it doesn't just implode. Because honestly, to modernize all those systems, it's going to take a lot of time and money, and
yeah,
nobody wants to do that either.
yeah. Um, I have to say my opinion, just from being in the federal government, it also stems from putting people in leadership positions to make these decisions who really do not have the knowledge or experience to make these decisions. And they make them without regard to the risk that they're taking on. I remember working, and I'm not going to say where it was,
Right,
or
sure.
I'm not going to give the person's name, but they had a bias against a certain software mogul. But because they had this bias and it was not based in any business rationale, they wanted to go completely away from that software and just said, make it happen. Like you said, just make it happen, make it happen. And,
Sure.
you know, the people who knew better said, do you know how many systems within our organization use that software? How many applications use that software? And you want to just stop using it and go to something completely different without doing any type of risk analysis or gap analysis and seeing what we need. Yes, I want this done in 2 years because dislike is too light of a word. It was almost a hatred, which, like I said, didn't make any sense. And tried to go that direction. It did not work, which most of us already knew it wasn't going to work. And the money that it costs to address just because this person had this idea and no one could speak to that person to get them to change their mind. And throughout my career, I've noticed that, but that was one of the worst examples that I had seen.
Oh. Danielle, isn't that wild? Because I totally agree with you. In my work with workplace psychological abuse and with a lot of whistleblowers on that front, I can say that by and large, that is the common thread we're seeing amongst many people in charge right now, because the only way they feel safe is exerting power and control over someone else to get their way, or to, again, we're in late stage capitalism. So it's the money, it's the power, it's the control, patriarchy, white supremacy, colonialism, because that's still at the root of it. I feel that's why we see such a common thread across all industries. I'll say on average, it's not every workplace, it's not every scenario, but I will say for me, in every room that I've been in a prioritization meeting with what we're going to go for the next PI or the next sprint, it was always about what's going to make the most money. And I was always that person. My business case would be like, it's the right thing to do, and we're going to reduce tech debt. Like, I would be that person. And after a while, I wasn't even invited to the prioritization meeting because they were so sick of hearing me about it was the right thing to do for the customer. And they were like, if it's not 80% of the customers, we're not doing it. I'm like, gross, gross. So that's where I feel we're like at a fever pitch, a tipping point. Because what's unfortunate is in the example you just named, that executive, I don't know who got the fall for that, but they just go to the next company and keep pushing their agenda, in my experience. So we have a much bigger thing happening, which is why I love your whistleblowing. And let's talk more about that. What does it mean to be a whistleblower?
Sure. And I will say, I get that question, like, what exactly is a whistleblower? What does that mean? Like, what do you do? Thinking it's like my job description. And I'm like, no, that's not my job description.
There,
Um,
yes.
so for anyone out there who doesn't really know what a whistleblower is, and I'm going to say this is Danielle's definition, it is a person who notices something wrong being done. And it could violate law, it could violate the company or organization policy. And they make it known to another manager or someone in their organization, especially if they're in a position of authority, that they're noticing something wrong being done. As soon as you have done that, you have become a whistleblower.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't just happen in government, local, state, or federal. It doesn't just happen in for-profit like Boeing. It happens across the board. You can have it in religious organizations. You can have it in nonprofits. You can have it in people who run for office who might see things that are going on and then tell about it. I think maybe a couple of years ago when I think it was Herschel Walker's campaign that somebody had made a complaint that they were being harassed. So it can happen anywhere. And because we're dealing with human beings, somebody is always going to try to do something they're not supposed to do. That's just going to be life until the end of time. You will always have this one, two, or group of people who are determined they're not going to follow the law or they're not going to follow the rules and that they're going to do things their way. So once that is made known, that person becomes a whistleblower. And so that's kind of what happened with me. I noticed behavior that I believe violated FAR or the Federal Acquisition Regulation. And I'll say that organization I worked for was the IRS or IRS policy. And when I noticed that, I made it known. And after I made that behavior known, I believe that I started becoming retaliated against.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay. The reason I asked that is when you blow the whistle, mine was one time around, we had done an end-to-end product analysis on one of our very vulnerable product, and we had found 38 failure points along the processes that would impact both the business and the customer. And leadership, frankly, didn't expect us to find that many. And so the decision was ultimately made to risk accept all of them. Some of it were clear violations that we did end up, my team and I just fixed like off the side of our desk. It was so wild. We felt responsible because we found them, and then it was taken away from us. And this is what is so rampant in workplace psychological abuse right now. When you become the whistleblower, you become,
You become a target.
yeah, you become a target because by and large, business today is not equipped to, and I want your personal professional opinion on this. I don't know that anybody's really equipped to morally, ethically manage a whistleblower situation, maybe of any kind.
I I'll say like with my experience, what I blew the whistle on was so boring. It was not salacious at all. I mean, your story's even more salacious than mine. It was the law says this, I'm not doing it. But hey, if you want to do it, go ahead and do it. Just don't involve me. What I tell people is that my story really starts with the retaliation part. So my belief is that people can manage whistleblowers. It's just they choose not to.
Yes.
Like it is easier to cover up. I mean, even if you look at it in the news, instead of dealing with the problem, their default is to cover it up. And I don't know if it's just a reflex, if people are scared that it's like the organization look bad. I don't understand that psychology, but to me, it's just a quick, well, let's cover it up instead of investigate and address.
I feel like leaders, I'll use the word leaders loosely. I feel that people in charge are scared. They're actually scared to come forward because they're either going to lose their job and their livelihood or they're going to lose money from the shareholders. Like we haven't, I feel, we're in this world today where we haven't given enough space to say mistakes are okay. And thank goodness you found them. Celebrating the person, celebrating the whistleblower. You're amazing. Thank you so much for finding that. Instead, it's like, oh crap, like heads are going to roll. And I feel like that's where people in charge are today, rather than fostering that, oh my gosh, thank you so much.
I think with some, I don't know, I have my, I guess, opinions or guesstimates of why my situation kind of happened the way it did. But when you're dealing with the federal government, we're not about making money. So it's not about making money. And so I would say for me, the lengths to which I believe things have gone is just completely, I was asked before and I said the word that comes to mind is asinine. I was like, this is just so asinine that it makes no sense. But I want to say over the last couple of years, if you look at the political environment that we're living in, especially in the US, I believe it's more of an alignment that groups of people are trying to get, especially with the federal government. So my journey started in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And so from 2017 up until 2022, I will say I was completely confused. I'm like, I don't believe that people are going to these lengths to cover up my complaint about bar regulation violation. It doesn't make any sense. This is going too far. And then when I started paying more attention to what was going on nationally, that's where I started becoming some assumptions that maybe there was more going on than I anticipated. And I don't know for certain, but it would make more sense than, I mean, to the point of fabricating events and fabricating documents. I'm like, y'all going too far. Like, this is just too much.
That's what gets so wild is those are the people that make the laws and they're going to really big lengths to cover something up. So you just never know. I don't mean to simplify or like make your experience about entertainment, but like, I don't think the show Scandal, I don't think it's that far off.
So I think it was in 2019, a friend of mine told me to watch Scandal. And I was like, well, why would, and then when I watched it, I said, okay. I said, no, I believe it is based off true experiences. The names have been changed to protect the guilty, but based off my experience, I'm like, yeah, Law and Order, those things can't be too far off. They're based off what someone has seen or lived through. Scandal. I haven't done it yet, but someone else told me to look at The West Wing and to watch, and I was like, okay.
So my husband and I have been binging deep in The West Wing. We're on for the past few months. It's exquisite and it's wild how many decisions are made, which is like, do we want to do this bad thing or this worse bad thing? I don't
Yeah.
know. So I'm not going to pretend to understand all of it. I applaud you for being a whistleblower in the federal government. I can't imagine what that took because mine was, I don't want to say mine was just in corporate America, but
So what are doing whistleblowers? There's for corporate
oh
America.
yeah, the stakes are about the money, power, and control. And that's what gets really scary toward individuals, I will say, who end up whistleblowing. So, Danielle, what are the moves you're excited to be making right now? Tell me about digital assassins. Tell me about protecting yourself. Tell me about all the moves you're making.
Sure. So back in 2022, my being an author journey started, both for me and family members. Events were being fabricated, documents being fabricated. I'll give one example, and it didn't happen to me, it happened to my parents. They got this ticket in the mail saying that my father failed to stop for a school bus. Well, we knew the ticket was fabricated because at the same time that he was supposedly failing to stop for a school bus, both he and my mom were at a doctor's appointment, which was something very rare for both of them to be at a doctor's appointment. I mean, she might have one and he'll go with her, but they both were seeing the doctor at the same time. And so he showed it to me, was kind of upset about it. And of course, I handled it. And I was spicy nice when I responded to the people.
Class, please, for appreciation on that term. Spicy nice.
Yes, spicy nice. Spicy nice. And I said, cloning has not been perfected yet. So they could not be at the doctor's office at the same time that supposedly failing to stop for this school bus. And within 24 hours, they completely dismissed the ticket. And I said, hold on, no, let's go back. I need to understand how this ticket was made because they had 3 pictures in the ticket. 2 were from the school bus where you could tell my father's vehicle was not in either one of those pictures. The 3rd picture, which was in the center, was like someone had been following him and took a picture of the back of his vehicle. And there was no time, date, or something. So you could tell that it was not from that school bus. It was someone had been following him to get the picture. And so that, like I said, there were other things that had been fabricated. When that happened, I was angry at first, and then I got concerned. I never got fearful, but I got concerned. I said, okay, if someone is going to the lengths to fabricate documents and events, what's next? Fabricating things to make me look like I'm a criminal. That was my mindset. I do know I go to the deep end of things, but that's what got me concerned. And so that's when I said, I'm going to have to document my story. And that's where Digital Assassins came. So I want to say Digital Assassins, the series, the book, I said it's fictional because I use fictional characters, conversations, but all of the events that I document in the book are real. They actually happen. And so what started off as what I would say something to protect myself is starting to morph into something different. Through this experience, what I have learned, I was somewhat of an advocate or had some social justice, not a lot, but I did. That what I learned is that is more of my passion, especially as it relates to privacy. Until this experience, I did not really truly understand how valuable our privacy is. With so much information being available, forget cyber breaches, identity theft, forget that. Things such as data theft. And I just had a book that just was released where I talk about data theft, where people who their job gives them access to our data, but are they protecting it? Are they, for some reason, even something as harmless as curiosity, looking at your information and what are they doing with it? So it has helped me to get this passion about really fighting for our privacy, thinking about how much information is available from the state or federal level about people and is it necessary? And having all that information available, do we need to relitigate and say, wait a minute, maybe we need to back up and maybe some of this stuff should not be out in the public? The book's out. I'm starting to really work with other privacy organizations to try to get some legislative action around protecting our privacy and other things about the government and its unfettered access to our data and more governance and transparency around what they do with it and with technology, how they are able to use technology without people knowing exactly what can be done when people misuse it, making sure that they're held accountable.
Because so much of our day-to-day relies on proving who we are, it is scary to think about way beyond identity theft, but like data privacy in general. It's like anybody can find out who you are. And how do you prove who you are? In fact, and my parents had a situation recently with theft where someone found my dad's driver's license on somewhere, put their picture on it, and used his credit, his social security number to pull credit. And they were able to buy 4 cars. And then my dad got the bill. And they drove the cars off the lot. So what's interesting is in my time in corporate America, I learned a lot about like third-party data brokers. And a lot of companies will use a third-party data broker to gather information on prospective customers. Because again, I worked on day one for California Consumer Privacy Act, which by the way, all the companies, of course, were so mad at because they're like, I got to go find all this data and give it back to you and like possibly delete it. Like it was so much work and time and money and resources. And I'm like, okay, California, kudos. We should have a right as consumers to know what you have on us.
Yes. How are you using it? How are you securing it?
Yeah.
All of that. It's extremely important. Mhm.
Yeah. A lot of times when, and I share this as an entrepreneur, I share with other people, be very mindful when you're buying lists of any kind, because it might not be just the information. Like, let's say that you want to buy however many email addresses, whatever, which actually is a whole other conversation because email data privacy is another thing. But you're buying data, but a lot of times in those data packages, a lot more comes with it. So for instance, what we found when we were poking around in our own data and inside our walls, we were finding out that we knew people's religions. We never bought that. Like we never wanted that data, but now it's ours. Ours meaning my former companies. We had to do something about it. We didn't know we had it, which is like the wild part.
I'll give you something even more wild than that. One of the things in my dating theft book that I talk about for anyone who either works for or contracts with the federal government, you go through this security adjudication process. And you can either do like a public trust or you can do a security clearance. Either one, they're extremely invasive. If I wanted to pretend I was you, I could with the data that's in there. Everything from your height, your weight, your driver's license, your passport number, where you've lived for the last at least 7 years. And not only is this information about you, people associated with you, your spouse, if you have siblings, your sibling's spouse, if you have stepsister, stepbrother, your parents, if you're married, your in-laws. There's so much information, your neighbors, past supervisors, coworkers. There's so much information that they can get on you, where you went out of town, if you went out of the country, where did you go and when? So there are rules that are supposed to govern this data collection, and it is not supposed to be shared without a need to know. When I left the IRS in 2017, again, because I was a whistleblower, in 2018, the IRS contacted, it's called DCSA. They keep all your security documentation. They contacted them and said, we need our security file. And the rationale that they used was pre-employment. We're considering her for a job. I was not notified that they got the request. My consent was not asked. And after they got it, I did not know. The only reason why I was able to find out, I did a FOIA request. And when I asked DCSA, who authorized this? I didn't say I want that agency to have my information. I left them. Well, they told us pre-employment, so we don't have to get your consent. And I said, but I didn't interview with them. You know, it was like what they told you is not accurate because I don't even remember I had applied with them. There's no application. But so they could get basically the book of my life without me knowing and without me getting consent. And that really made me upset. And I'm like, no, some laws need to change now. And when it happened, like I said, that happened in 2018, and I'm going through the process of trying to fight that. I didn't kind of understand the relevance until around, I'll say 2022, when Roe was overturned. And people were like, well, how does that relate? Well, when they started being national abortion bans, and again, it doesn't matter if you agree with or not, you had law enforcement officials who wanted to go across state lines and get data from other states because they wanted to know what was going on with that patient to see if they'd done whatever. And in 2022, there was this Supreme Court decision overturning a 1974 decision where you could sue the federal government if they violated your constitutional rights. And so when I talk to people, I said that immunity decision for Trump gets a lot of press. I said, but go back 2 years. I said, because when I sued the federal government saying, hey, I think you guys violated my right to privacy by this organization going and getting data that I didn't consent to. And I will say, I'm not an attorney, but my reading of the court's ruling was, hey, the Supreme Court said that as long as they're acting within their official duties and you weren't seriously harmed, meaning you weren't destroyed, so you have no case. Yeah, they might have violated your privacy, but I was like, this is not making sense. But then again, I said, when you paint it with what's going on, so one aspect of Project 2025 is we're going to fire all of the current federal workers and we're going to bring in our own people. And so if you want people to be able to surveil people to see what you're doing, what you're watching, what you're buying, want people to be able to collect your data because, hey, we need to know if that woman went across state lines to get an abortion or trans care or whatever. Well, we need to have the infrastructure in place to be able to do that and the legal blessing of the court where you can't sue us for doing those type of actions. And I know a lot of people say, well, that seems a little extreme. I'm like, I lived through it. And even though I wasn't getting abortion, I'm not getting trans care or anything like that, it's happened to me. And so even if you don't agree with that or you have other thoughts as it concerns this particular issue, you got to look beyond that because those capabilities are not going to stop there. And I'm like, I'm living through it. It's not going to stop there.
Danielle, let's get extreme on this. If you can't prove who you are on paper, like I know who I am on the soul level, but the federal government would not recognize that. Like anything I wanted to do officially out in the world would not recognize who I am on the soul level. So I've got to be connected to this number. And if somebody else says it's that, who's right? And how do you possibly prove that? This is a big freaking deal.
All the information that's on your driver's license is
Yeah.
on there. All the information that's on your, if you have a passport, it's on there. If you know, it's not impossible. I'm not going to say very easy. It's not impossible to recreate those documents with accurate information because when data theft happens, they're not getting fake info. These are people who have access to factual information. So any of these individuals who has all this information about me, well, where did you live in 2010? Oh, this is where she lived. Well, how do they know that? Because they have my security file. Well, who was your neighbor in this address? Oh, how do they know that? Because they have my security file. And because of how long I've been like associated with the federal government, you're talking about at least 20 years worth of data. So anyone would be able to recreate the book of my life because they got this data. And what I would say is under false pretenses because I was not and still am not looking for a job there. So what was the real reason for you getting that data? Who has it and where is it now? And no one can answer that question for me.
And that's what you're in the middle of.
Yes.
My word. If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to have you back on throughout to give us updates. Let's make this loud. How many people that have not had your experience even know that this could be? How do we know if that file's been pulled? You got a FOIA update or what was
What
it?
I did a FOIA request, and a lot of people, I'll explain. A FOIA is called a Freedom of Information Act request, and most people don't know what it is or how to ask. But there is some type of information request that every organization should have that has your information, and they should be able to tell you who has accessed it, when, and why. They should be able to. I'm not saying that they can, but they should be able to give you that information. And I want to say that's kind of why, because a lot of people were asking me, but what exactly? I wrote the book on data theft, layman's terms, what it is, and why it is so important to everyone from your teenager to senior citizens. And I'm talking out and speaking out about it because I'm a whistleblower. You don't have to be a whistleblower. You could be someone who is going through a health challenge and you go in the doctor's office, kind of like Princess Kate when she had her health challenge and someone was trying to access her medical records. Why were they probably doing that? Probably trying to sell it. I mean, I can't say for sure what they were trying to do, but people who had access to her medical records were trying to get access and they had no medical or business reason to know. So it can happen to anybody, and we all should be aware of what it is and how it can impact our lives, and what do we need to do from a policy and a legislative perspective to protect ourselves. Because, like you said, identity theft is one thing, and we need to fight on that front. A whole nother thing is data theft, and it's different. These are people who their jobs say they can access this data, and are they doing it because they need to know, or do they have some other reason for doing it? And what are they going to do once they have that info?
I'm gonna go live in the forest, like off the grid, and just go back to the land. That was never mine. Anyway, another conversation. So you touched on this earlier, but I want to ask a little bit more. You have a series out through your cybersecurity information security group on LinkedIn, the correlation between Project 2025 and Digital Assassins Q&A series. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And can you choose one that you are the most like, everybody needs to know this?
It would be the one that I talked about, the data, getting rid of the current federal staff to bring in people that are loyal to a particular administration and are loyal to getting a specific agenda done. That is what I would say is the biggest thing that people need to pay attention to. I won't and I can't like endorse one candidate or the other, but when you look at specifically with Project 2025, one of the aspects is we don't think people should be looking at pornography. Whether you look at it or not, I don't. How would you enforce something like that? Well, that means you have to institute Big Brother. You're surveilling what people are doing. And whether you agree with it or not, if they're doing it for that aspect of your life, they're going to be doing it for others. And I say, especially for women, there's a move where people do not believe that women should be in the workplace, that we should be in positions of leadership or whatever. There is this move. And if you do not have kids, they're worthless and all they should do is either babysit or whatever. Those are other things that when you have unfettered access to people's data, and I'll give another example, and I talk about it in all of my books, where when I was going through the background investigation process, there were 3 questions that I was asked that completely were inappropriate. One was if I had illegitimate children. The other was if there was someone out there who knew anything embarrassing about me of a sexual nature. And the third was the financial status of my family, if anybody was bribable. So between myself and at least one of my references, that information was trying to be gathered. And if there's someone out there asking this information of people, that means there's the technical database set up to collect it. And when I made a big stink about it, they're like, oh, well, we can ask that for people with undergoing security clearances. I said, but I wasn't. And so everybody went quiet. No one would respond. And even with people with security clearances, why are you asking them those types of questions? What is the reason and rationale? But like I said, if those questions were asked of me and my references, there it means the database is already set up to collect. And what are you going to do with that information? I ask them, do you ask that of married people? Do you ask that of Caucasians, especially Caucasian men? Do you ask them those questions? And what are you going to do with that information? Is that going to be a basis of saying, yes, she could work for the federal government or contract with the federal government? And those are the type of things I like share with people. One of the things with Project 2025 is that, and I don't like to call them Christians because I'm a Christian, these religious people, they have a thought of how people should live and how they should conduct themselves. So are they going to be the surveyors or the judges of, well, we think that person is morally okay, so they can work for the federal government doing project management, which has nothing to do with, your kids or the financial status of your family. You can do your job, whether you do or don't have children, but those are types of questions and things that I kind of lived through that I see as a correlation to Project 2025, asking certain questions, trying to get certain information, covering people, especially who work in the IRS, where I call them bad actors. Why? Because of the way that the laws are set up, it's very easy to use the IRS to retaliate against people. Was it McCabe and I think Comey who underwent those audits, and they was like, well, the word or the way that they said it was that, oh, there was nothing nefarious going on there. Yeah, right. But how do you prove that? But my experience, I underwent, quote unquote, an audit. And once you undergo them, you can't stop it. But it's those type of things that I believe are correlations to Project 2025 in an effort to use the federal government to install the type of government that certain special interest groups want.
Mm-mm-mm. So, Danielle, what do we do? I joke that I want to go off the grid, but from your purview, you're in the middle of it and you're on the forefront. You're a pioneer for not only educating all of us who don't know, but also the average citizen who's just trying to make it every day and live an honest life and just be peaceful. And one of these things could occur. What would you say to those folks and how to kind of protect ourselves the best we can, knowing that all of this kind of macro stuff is looming?
The first thing I would say, first off, okay, it's okay to have an emotional response. And people are like, oh my God, okay, have it. Do not let it take over because fear paralyzes and you become no good when you become fearful. The second thing is that there are a lot of good things that technology and information does. Remember that. If you ever had someone who had cancer and they were able to go through it and they're still living because technology, whatever, there are a lot of good things. But like I stated earlier, you're always going to have these bad actors. So inhale, exhale. They will be there. Yeah, they will be there. So this is not anything new. Once we figure this out, something else is going to come through. So have your moment, then you say, okay. The next thing is knowledge is power. And the more of us that have the knowledge, the more powerful we become. Like I said, I've been working in IT like you. We've been doing it for over 20 years. And I had no idea. I had no idea. So as surprised as people who are listening to me are, that's how surprised I was and continue to be. Go a little bit more detail in the book, but the biggest thing that I would say for people is that you do not have to be an advocate yourself. You don't have to do that. There are groups, privacy protection groups that are out there who do this. So the biggest thing that I would tell people is that support those groups. Get on a newsletter or mailing list so when things come up that you know. I don't even want to reinvent the wheel, but get involved with groups that are already established. You might even just support them by listening to a meeting every 6 months or whatever, but really align yourself with these other groups that are already fighting the battle and stay aware. The more of us that know and the more of us that can fight, the more likely that we'll get change. When it's just one or two or even 10 people, nothing's going to get done. I'm telling you from my experience. I want to say exaggerating a little bit, but I felt like that people were kind of laughing, like, huh, basically, yeah, we did this. What are you going to do about it? We are the federal government, so we can do what we want, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so that was the response that I felt that I was getting. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll see about that. That might be how you are right now. But one of my friends said, you always say this, be attached, meaning I'm about to lay somebody out an email and I'm going to attach and let you see. And the other one was like, oh, you got the right one this time. And so that's kind of the attitude I had. I said, okay, yeah, y'all got the right one this time. So 2017, 2018, 2019, yeah, y'all might have gotten off, but I'm not letting this go. And it might take me 10 years, it might take me 20. And it's not about getting revenge on the people who did it. It is about, this is a practice, this is a pattern of behavior, and one with which I do not agree. So we'll let God deal with them people that did what they're not supposed to be doing. I'm going to deal with the pattern and the practice and the behavior, because I believe there are more of us who do not like that type of behavior and believe that it's illegal or unethical and immoral, and that there are more of us that are willing to speak up and say this needs to change. And like I said, I'm patient. I can take time.
Finding the spot between wanting to go hide under a rock and finding your own unique way to protect yourself, but also to be aware and support others. So amazing. Where can we find you? In a way that you consent. How can we find you in a way that you consent?
Yes. So I do have a website, daniellespencer.org. I'm also on social media. Please feel free to reach out, ask me any questions. I also do have like a YouTube channel where I talk a little bit about Project 2025 and the correlation there. I also did one where I talked about The Handmaid's Tale, where I had heard that a lot about us moving towards like a Handmaid's Tale type of reality. And I had never read the book, but I bought it. I looked at the TV series and I have a better understanding now. I can see the correlation, and it's very interesting how books can foreshadow what's going on. Hey, you want to live in an area or town or wherever who don't do that, that's fine. Y'all go do that there. But stop trying to force your beliefs on everybody else, because when you do that, you will look up and not long after, you won't be able to do things that you believe is okay. Because once you give a small group of people that power, they're going to do whatever they need to do to keep it, even if they have to make up stuff about you. And so people need to be a little bit more mindful of what they accept and what they want to implement for others.
This has been an enlightened hour. Closing remarks as we wrap up.
First, I enjoyed the conversation. I'm very happy to be here and be able to share my experiences. The biggest thing I would tell people, because what we talked about is pretty heavy, is do not be frightened. Do not be frightened. Fear, it's okay to have it, the emotion, but counter it with knowledge and then action. I feel we will prevail, especially as these actions are brought to light. Bad actors only thrive when there's darkness and people don't know what they're doing. And now we see what's going on. So we will be okay.
Thanks, Danielle.
You're welcome.